tell us a little bit about what do you think the biggest misconception is about food and nutrition?
Food and yeah, there's a lot to kind of unpack within that. I think whether it's how it's raised or the nutrients of that, I think that's where, it's starting to become a gray area, which is sometimes why I enjoy what I do because I can kind of bridge both of those gaps. But I think as it relates just specifically to nutrition, it's not very shiny or sexy to eat like a balanced diet of like, oh, here's my 75% of my plate fruits and vegetables and a quarter of that my protein source. That's not really that fun. And so there's just a lot of misinformation out there.
Well, hello, I'm Zippy Duvall, and I'm president of American Farm Bureau and host for the Farmside Chat today. And all of you know that I travel around the country and collect up stories from my grassroots, our farmers and ranchers, to be able to tell those stories as I go around Washington, D.C. But today, as you see, I'm in a packed full car. As Sheri, my guest, said, it's life. My daughter's moving from Washington back to Georgia to take a job at Georgia Tech. And I thought I would be through moving her home yesterday. But of course, one young lady can collect more stuff in 10 years than you can ever dream. And now my truck's packed full and I'm pulling a trailer behind me. So still trying to do that daddy stuff along with my Farm Bureau stuff. But I really think this might be my last move. I'm going to hire somebody next time. So we'll see. But today I have a great guest with me, and she's a young lady from Oklahoma. Her and her husband, Kyle, uh, uh, Sheri Glazier, is with us today. She lives on a ranch with her husband, Kyle, and they have two children. And she is also a nutritionist. So before we get started, Sheri, would you tell everybody a little bit more about the farm and the ranch that y'all live on, and
I would
a little bit more about your nutrition background?
All the above. So all these things
Yeah.
in my life have aligned. Yeah. So my husband Kyle and I live in a small farming community. It's about 65 miles northwest of Oklahoma City, a little town called Loyal, primarily in wheat country, but also we raise cattle, cows and calves, and stocker. Whenever we get rain here, we're able to graze cattle on wheat here as well too. And then really trying to diversify, cover crops, and doing all sorts of things like that as well too, as well as Milo and sesame we've tried. This year's a little bit meager because we haven't gotten hardly any rain, but a little bit about my farming heritage, I guess. I'm born and raised in Oklahoma, and our my farming heritage began in Oklahoma in 1892. So I would be fifth generation. My children would be sixth. But my interest for food nutrition and how does a registered dietitian play into all this? People are like, why is a farmer and a dietitian talking to me? Well, kind of begins with my life story. But I was in 4-H, and food and nutrition was always one of my 4-H projects. I always just kind of loved the kitchen, loved the aspect of sports, and all those things kind of coming together, and then combined with my upbringing on a farm as well too. So I was raised on a cattle and wheat farm, as I mentioned. Ultimately, though, I got to play basketball collegiately, and that's kind of where the nutrition thing started to spark. But I never really knew how in the world I was going to get back to agriculture. As a young female, you just kind of never know where the world's going to blow you. Especially here in Oklahoma, it blows a lot. So I finished I finished my bachelor's at Oklahoma State. Got my master's there as well too, and completed a dietetic internship. That's 1,200 hours of supervised practice, and landed that big hospital job. So I got to work in big metropolitan hospital as a clinical dietitian. And then as kind of years have gone on, I transitioned to prevention and more of the outpatient role, and then worked in some rural hospitals because at the time I was traveling home. I was being grounded at coming home to be a farm wife, and young children as well too. And so ultimately, though, the interesting piece is where does the agriculture piece come back? I discovered a contract position with the Oklahoma Beef Council here in Oklahoma, and that's where kind of my business called Dirt Road Dietitian LLC, basically nutrition consulting. So I get to bridge a lot of agriculture and nutrition communications just based on my total upbringing and based on the work that I do as well now. So I get to bridge a lot of that with the audiences that I do now. So that's a little bit about kind of my two worlds.
So you have two children, right?
I do Cole and Gentry.
Okay, two boys. And
A boy and a girl.
oh, boy, girl. Okay.
Yeah.
And your husband, did he come from an ag background?
He did. He did. He is multi-generational as well too. But
Okay.
yes.
So y'all are very deep in agriculture. Well, as farmers, we all hear all the misconceptions about, what we do and the health of healthiness of the food that we grow. Tell us a little bit about what do you think the biggest misconception is about food and nutrition?
Food and yeah, there's a lot to kind of unpack within that. I think whether it's how it's raised or the nutrients of that, I think that's where, it's starting to become a gray area, which is sometimes why I enjoy what I do because I can kind of bridge both of those gaps. But I think as it relates just specifically to nutrition, it's not very shiny or sexy to eat like a balanced diet of like, oh, here's my 75% of my plate fruits and vegetables and a quarter of that my protein source. That's not really that fun. And so there's just a lot of misinformation out there as far as like how do we eat, and what do we eat as far as diets and things. Those are not long-term solutions. And I think the other piece of that too, Zippy, is like we really underappreciate the generational impact that our families have on our food culture as well too, which ultimately impacts how we think about food and nutrition too. And so, you think about food scarcity, Great Depression, for us, the Dust Bowl and things like that. So potentially what our grandparents or great grandparents lived through potentially can still be impacting us as well too. And so I deal a lot with the Clean Your Plate Club, and really challenging that thought like, no, it's okay. You don't have to eat all that food on your plate, because food scarcity, thankfully, is not as big of a deal. In the United States anymore, we have a lot of food programming that makes sure no kiddos go hungry. But the other piece of that too is really we just lack a solid nutrition foundation. And so if we don't have a solid foundation, what happens, right? So that's where the misinformation can breed. And that's where people can have a lot of thoughts about food and what we should do and what we shouldn't do, and a lot of personalized stories that potentially what work for them they feel like may work for others, and it may not be grounded in science. And so that's kind of where I, as a dietitian, can come in, and I really like to challenge some of that thought. A lot of times I feel like I'm a psychologist in some point because you got to dig through a lot of psychological things as well too. And so really helping people how to build a healthy plate for the long term, I think that's really important, because a lot of people live in what I called food silos of the good and bad, or I was good all week and then now we're going to have cheat meals on the weekend, and really what that's building is an unhealthy relationship with food long term, and ultimately that's going to be passed down because our kids and our grandkids are watching us of how we act and react around food as well too. And so if I could just have one thing, I just want someone to seek out a dietitian and really get some grounded nutrition advice. 75% of that plate, really fiber rich foods, get that animal protein in there if you choose to eat animal protein. And I think what such a lasting impact that you could have, on the next generation, if you can lay a solid foundation for those around you around that, because we eat so many times a day. And if we're not confident when we're just doing that, then that can really lend into some other things in life that we may not feel confident about either. And so, I really, really feel like there's really an area of big opportunity there.
So if I watch my children with their children, and it appears to me that they're more nutrition health conscious than what we were as parents, because our parents weren't that health conscious. Mama always cooked. We never went out.
Yep.
And then when my wife and I had children, it was kind of a combination. We cooked, but we also went out because all the activities the kids were involved in, and probably what we were eating at home was okay, but what we was eating out probably wasn't okay because it was always fast. And so I think your point of view from a cultural thing definitely it affects the way we do things today. But I really think our young people are more conscious. Would you agree with that?
I do. There's a select number that are, and a lot of it has to do with our access, because we have so much access to, fruits and veggies across the board. Here in Oklahoma, we are not known for raising like tremendous fruit and vegetable crops, right? And so that's where we're going to rely on the canned, the frozen, the fresh options that we can get at our grocery stores. And that's where, as a dietitian too, hey, if you can eat conventionally grown products and it's totally fine. We don't eat enough fiber anyways. That's just science right now for our data of our food consumption. And if we can get more people to really embrace the frozen and the canned, piece of that, there's really a lot of opportunity for impact as well there too.
So, getting it fresh in the grocery store and cooking it and preparing it yourself versus frozen versus in a can. Tell me, I mean, I don't know what's the difference. Which is the most nutrition, and is it better than not doing it at all? So,
Yeah, so there's where a lot of challenge comes into thinking I can only have fresh product or fresh frozen or fresh produce all the time. I personally live 30 miles from a grocery store, and so I do not always have access to the consistency of it. I'm not going to the store once a week. It's usually about once a month, and so that's where the frozen comes into play. And there is research to show that even frozen is even has the nutrition is just still comparable. Do not like weigh this out of like um, the little tiny differences, but canned and frozen can be just as nutritious or more nutritious because they can preserve it basically right there from the field.
but when they preserve it, do they not add a lot of salt and everything that might be harmful to us, or not?
Especially, yeah, it depends. And so frozen veggies are usually just that. They just, they may parboil them and flash freeze them, and they're still just green beans, if that makes sense. Then where it comes into cans, so cans sometimes can be preserved with salt, but then there's also we have plenty of options with no salt added. And that's a great option too. Or if that's not in your budget and you don't want to pay the extra 40 cents for unsalted corn or something, you can rinse it in a colander. And really just some of those little tips and tricks like that can really make a huge impact for someone, no matter where they are or where they live in the United States.
Well, I also understand that you joined the American Foundation for Agriculture, who hosted a On the Farm STEM program. Can you tell us a little bit about, by the way, the American Foundation for Agriculture is the foundation for American Farm Bureau. If anybody here hears anything of interest, we'd love to have you contribute to it, and because it helps us teach agriculture to children and make them more literate when it comes to agriculture. So tell us your experience, and was it a good one? How valuable was it to you and the people that visited, and a little bit of what went on at that meeting?
It was one of my highlights of the summer, to be 100% honest with you. I enjoy experiential learning, and they tasked me with basically, hey, come in as a dietitian. Let's talk a little bit about nutrition and that piece of it, but also let's get in the kitchen as well too. So we got to bring science into the kitchen as well too, and we learned about beef nutrition, just some of those hot topics that surround beef. And those things that people are really uncomfortable with, or they like, I really don't know the answer to this. I lend some of that light of the science on that as well too. And then we took it to the kitchen, and thankfully we were at Oklahoma State University where they have teaching kitchens, and so we were able to. Everyone was able to cook their own lunch. We did a Greek beef bowl, and so I don't know how you feel about cooking, Zippy, but honestly, I feel like every cooking is always a science experiment. You may never know what's going to happen when you do this or do that, and so we just basically and really just highlighted that as well too, of like, hey, we're going to do a Maillard reaction, so we're going to we're going to grill or cook a steak in a skillet and see that caramelization, things that happen with that. Help them guide through choosing a lean cut. So we did a strip steak, which would be the long side of the T-bone, right? So New York strip or Kansas City strip. And really kind of helping them guide through, hey, if their students want to choose lean beef, how do we do that, and how do we cook that as well too? And then really just, hey, let's just cook some zucchini and squash, saute that up in the skillet. It's a one pan type meal. And really looking at those fiber rich foods and putting that into application, right? So we have all these recommendations as nutrition experts. How can we put that into application, and how can we make that tasty? And so that was what we did as well too, but also safe cooking temperatures. So we want people to be cooking beef to a safe internal temperature, where steaks and roasts can be cooked to 145 and ground beef to 160, 165. And so that was really impactful. So then we just built the bowl. So we have a foundation, right? So you can hear us. I'm saying I'm really I love foundations. And so that quinoa rice foundation, then added in the cooked delicious steak, pair that with those zucchini and squash, and then topped that off with tzatziki sauce, which was from yogurt as well too. So as you look at my plate and as you look at that, we were able to build a really healthy and delicious and quite honestly nourishing meal for them. So they were able to go to their next step to Pfeiffer Angus Farms and be able to visit them and continue to learn within that as well too. And my hope is that they were able to take back some of these tips and tricks in the kitchen and be able to, communicate that to their kids and let them have that experiential learning in their classroom as well too. And I think what's such a gift if they were able to do that and have a foundation for the kitchen for their students as well too.
And a lot of people that go to the kitchen and start cooking, preparing their meals, have absolutely no thoughts of going toward what a farmer does and how science and technology is involved in growing that food that they're fixing to prepare. And these teachers learn how to go back to the classroom and start teaching classes uh, using the experience they had in Oklahoma with you and around the beef project and being able to teach science and technology and stuff in the classrooms and doing something that's kind of something the children can touch. And they go back home and share it with their family about what they learned. And I think it's just been a real powerful exercise.
And that's the unique thing. I think it's really important to showcase the uniqueness of agriculture in each respective state. And that's why I really enjoyed that, that program as well too. And that's basically, like wheat and beef kind of roll together here in our state. We use them. They work together, especially where I live. And that's, this is why we raise beef here is because that's what geographically and environmentally, that's what it's given to us. And it's really neat to be able to connect those and understand as farmers we're using that to the best of our ability, but also this is why we have such a great end product and safe and nutritious as well too.
You're not going to believe what just happened. My computer got overheated and we had to stop and back up and cool it off and start over again. So I'm back with Sheri and we're discussing ranching and nutrition and also talking about ag literacy and how school teachers can play a major role in helping children understand agriculture, nutrition, and what farmers and ranchers do to produce their food. So, Sheri, tell us how important do you think it really is for us as farmers and ranchers to connect with the consumer and tell that story?
I, as you know, we are like through what the average American is 3 generations removed from the farm or production agriculture or anything like that. And a lot of the work that I do with the Oklahoma Beef Councils, I ask this very similar question, and typically they respond to that of like who do you know in agriculture? How far removed are you? They usually say I don't know, and so I think it's just so important to be able to be open minded because people are curious. They really want to know, they want to know if our cows are happy and how we take care of them and what we do. And they want to know what they eat. And it may seem second nature, especially if you're multi generations in or even first generation. It may seem second nature because this is what you wake up and do every day. But if you don't tell someone what you do, someone else could be potentially writing a very different story for us. And so that's why I just feel it's really important to be able to, and that's why I feel like it's great to work with ag organizations and connect, those that are curious to those of us that actually work in these different spaces to be able to share our story, whether that's just through the farm or through programs like I do with the Beef Council, connecting even dietetic interns, future dietitians who are going to be making nutrition recommendations. I want to take them out to the farm and the ranch. I want them to meet the experts that are raising our animals and our food, and also them to meet the other experts in a large animal veterinarian, even a meat scientist, which many of them had no idea a meat science expert even exists. And I am enamored with understanding meat science. I enjoy that, and even a cattle nutritionist or a cattle dietitian. That's going to relate really well to my audiences as well too, and really identifying those where they can, like, they're experts in their field. As a dietitian, I want people to respect me as an expert. But so I think it's just really even more important to be able to connect those experts with other experts. So that way, we can just share a story and provide some context because we know there's a lot of misinformation that's really swarming around out there.
People don't really realize it. They think that farmers may not have been doing the right things for a long time, but I've had a nutritionist for my dairy herd since the early '80s. I mean, and I was taught and brought up knowing that if the cows weren't happy and healthy, they weren't going to produce for me, and I had to have them producing so that we could make a living there on the farm and keep it sustainable for the future. And we've been doing that for decades, and not just with the animals, but with our soils and our natural resources too. So I think it's really important. I think this is probably a better time than ever to be able to talk to the citizens of our country and the people around the world about what American agriculture really does. So if someone's interested, I know you got a big social media influence because I've went and watched some of your stuff. If someone wanted to contact you or follow you, tell them how they do that.
You just come join me. Dirt Road Dietitian. Dietitin is how you spell dietitian. And then we also share so I'm on Instagram, Facebook there as well too, and just website. And if you're just curious about our farm in general, that's Glazier Farms, Glazier Farms within that as well too. And social media is a tool I do feel like we all can use. We have to find a healthy balance with that as well too, raising a family and kids and having a job. But it's a great tool for us to use in agriculture to allow us to connect to others in a safe place, open up a safe place for them to ask questions.
Thank you so much, Sheri, for being with us and through all the technical difficulties that I've had here on the road trying to get my daughter back home to Georgia to go to work at Georgia Tech. But we really appreciate what you do. And I will tell you that our organization and our foundation really appreciates the beef organizations and the beef community receiving us like they do and let us work with them, be good partners with them. So thank you for being with us.
As a farmer, I appreciate the work that you guys are doing as well too.
Well, thank you. Any last words, Sheri?
It's just an honor to be with you today. And if you're curious to learn any more about nutrition and agriculture, I invite you to come seek me out or seek out a dietitian near you as well too.
And we look forward to seeing you down the road somewhere when I visit in Oklahoma. I hope I'll be back there someday and be able to visit with you, maybe on y'all's ranch, and hear some of your stories. Thank you so much, Sheri Glazier, with us today, talking about nutrition and agriculture, and we really enjoyed our conversation. So thanks for everyone joining us. We hope you have a wonderful day with less technology complications than I've had, and we hope God blesses you the rest of the day. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Farmside Chat. Please be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, take a minute to rate and review the podcast. This helps us continue to bring you farm fresh content that everyone can enjoy. Until next time, thank you and God bless you.